Hey guys, tonight we slip into the warm sands of time where torches flicker against ancient walls and the dry air smells faintly of resin and dust. You're standing at the edge of the Nile as the sun sets, watching its surface ripple like molten gold. The palm trees sway just enough to remind you there's a breeze, but not enough to keep you from sweating through your tunic. You probably won't survive this if you forgot to pack water or at least a hat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk forward, your sandals crunching over packed sand, into a landscape that has already outlived thousands of years. The pyramids loom in the fading glow, massive and silent, as if waiting for you to finally notice them. They don't really need your awe. They've been standing here since long before your great-great-great to the power of 30 grandparents were born. And they'll probably still be here long after the neon signs of our own cities fade into dust. As twilight deepens, you imagine the people of ancient Egypt preparing for bed. No cell phones, no glowing alarm clocks, just oil lamps hissing faintly and the rhythmic pulse of crickets by the river. Some families slept on mats of woven reeds, others on raised wooden frames that creaked in the night. A good bed, by the way, was a sign of wealth, sort of like having memory foam today, except without the threat of your cat needing it at 3 in the morning. Here's a solid historical fact for you. Egyptians really did use headrests instead of pillows. They carved them out of wood, stone, or ivory, propping their heads up on these cool little stands. Supposedly, this kept creepy crawlies from getting into your ears at night. Now that's a sleep concern you probably didn't have on your checklist. Of course, while some Egyptians drifted into slumber under the stars, priests and scribes spent long nights charting dreams. They believed dreams weren't just nonsense but direct messages from gods. Imagine if every time you dreamed about losing your math homework, someone wrote it down as divine prophecy. Historians still argue whether these dream books were meant for medical guidance, religious interpretation, or just an ancient form of late-night entertainment. Either way, it made sleep into a spiritual experience, not just a biological necessity. You pause and picture yourself inside one of the grand houses along the Nile. There smells of lotus flowers and burning incense. Women smooth perfumed oils over their skin, while men discuss harvests and trade. Kids predictably stall bedtime by begging for another story. Some of those stories include wild myths about gods battling chaos, or bizarre little tales like Ra, the sun god, sailing his boat through the underworld every night. Think of it like the ultimate cosmic night shift. And yes, they had their own version of sleep hacks. One fringe tidbit: ancient Egyptians sometimes smeared crocodile dung mixed with honey as a cosmetic or medicinal paste. No joke. While not exactly marketed as sleep lotion, it was believed to cure ailments and ward off spirits. You can be grateful your nighttime skincare routine doesn't involve amphibian leftovers unless you're into that, in which case, no judgment. As the desert night grows cooler, the city quiets down. You imagine lying in a courtyard under a canopy of woven reeds, the Milky Way stretching across the sky in impossible clarity. No streetlights, no buzzing electronics, just stars so sharp they feel like they're puncturing the dark. The Nile drifts by, its currents carrying whispers from Nubia in the south to the Delta in the north. Traders, scribes, priests, and farmers all folding into the same long dream. You listen closer. Somewhere Ahab strings out a lullaby. Somewhere Else, dogs bark at shadows along the walls. And in the temples, the priests continue chanting under torchlight, believing their words keep the universe in balance. The sense of continuity is overwhelming. You're falling asleep in a world that feels both impossibly ancient and oddly familiar. And here's the funny thing. You realize you're not that different from them. Sure, you have Wi-Fi and pizza delivery, they had date wine and papyrus scrolls. But at the end of the day, both you and an Egyptian farmer worry about the same bedtime essentials: comfort, safety, and a good story before drifting off. That little overlap across 5,000 years is strangely comforting, like a cosmic wink reminding you that humans have always needed to rest, to dream, to recharge. As you cool deeper into the immerging bait, the murmur of the Nile becomes like white noise. Crickets chirp and steady head moan. A soft breeze ruffles the reeds. And you realize that even in a place of monumental architecture and endless desert, the most enduring act is simply closing your eyes and letting go. The pyramids may rise like eternal sentinels, but your eyelids are heavier than stone. Your body softens against the woven mat. The dream scribes are ready to interpret whatever strange visions you're about to conjure, and somewhere in the corner, a priest is nodding off mid-chant, just like you're about to do. Sleep in ancient Egypt is both foreign and familiar, ritualistic yet deeply human. And as you drift, you can't help but smile at the thought that tonight you've joined a timeless club, one that stretches across deserts, centuries, and stars. You shift now from the sands of Egypt to a rocky shoreline where the air smells of salt and olive groves. The sun dips behind marble columns and a chorus of cicadas rattles in the background like an over-caffeinated percussion section. You find yourself strolling through the heart of ancient Greece, where sleep comes not in silence but with the murmur of philosophy, myth, and the occasional goat bleating at completely the wrong time of night. The homes here aren't extravagant palaces for most people. They're whitewashed, simple, with clay floors and wooden furniture that creaks if you sit too heavily. Instead of beds stuffed with feathers, many Greeks slept on pallets of straw, often shared with family members. Imagine tucking yourself into that crunchy nest while your uncle snores like Zeus throwing thunderbolts next door. Practical but hardly luxury. Yet, there's something undeniably charming about winding down your evening in Athens or Sparta. Oil lamps cast a soft amber glow, shadows stretching like elongated myths on the walls. Outside, the agora grows quiet, and you hear faint notes of Allah's pipes drifting in from a neighbor practicing late. You settle into a corner, eavesdropping on philosophers who, of course, never seem to know when to quit. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Socrates, that barefoot master of annoying questions, believed that dreams revealed truths about the soul. He and his contemporaries often debated whether the sleeping mind had access to a purer reality. Imagine trying to drift off while a friend insists your dream about showing up late to class in a toga actually means you've glimpsed eternal forms. Relaxing? Maybe not, but certainly engaging. What fascinates you is how central storytelling was to bedtime. Parents lulled children to sleep not with lullabies about sheep, but with tales of Heracles wrestling lions or Odysseus outsmarting cyclopes. These myths weren't just entertainment, they were moral roadmaps explaining bravery, wit, or the dangers of being a total jerk to the gods. And here's the kicker. Even grown adults often whispered these stories before sleep, as if reminding themselves that life's battles might be mirrored in their dreams. A quirky tidbit for you: Greeks sometimes used poppy-based concoctions to induce sleep. Yes, opium. Mixed into drinks or applied in remedies, it was their version of melatonin gummies, though with a tad more risk of, well, being far too effective. They also burned certain herbs like fennel or myrtle, letting the smoke curl through rooms as a kind of sleepy incense. If you've ever fallen asleep with lavender in a diffuser, congratulations! You've been keeping up a 2,500-year-old tradition, minus the questionable pharmaceutical edge. The conversation doesn't stop, though. Around a fireside, you lean in as two men argue about whether dreams come from the gods or from digestion. One insists your visions are sacred, the other mutters that it's probably just the goat stew you ate too late. Historians still argue whether Greeks leaned more toward divine or biological explanations, but either way, it seems humanity has always blamed dinner for bad dreams. You wander further, past courtyards strung with grapevines. So wäre a small Theatertruppe rehearses unter Torchlight. You hear laughter, the kind that comes when people are too tired to be polite anymore. Someone drops a line, someone else trips over their sandal, and the whole cast collapses into giggles. Even in a world that gave us tragic dramas, bedtime could end with simple comedy. The stars overhead blaze like cold fire, and you remember this is the same sky navigators will use for centuries. Greeks were already mapping constellations, telling stories about Orion the Hunter or Andromeda chained to a rock. Imagine lying on your straw mat, eyes heavy, while your father points upward. That cluster there? That's Zeus showing off again. It's like a cosmic bedtime projector, only free, eternal, and immune to low batteries. You pass a symposium hall where the last cups of diluted wine are raised. The discussions have slurred into half-formed ideas about virtue, justice, or whether Achilles would have been happier if he'd just stayed home. Summieren snores mit Argument, earning chuckles, and suddenly even the greatest philosophical gathering feels like a sleepover gone long past bedtime. But here's something you notice. Despite all the chatter, there's a gentleness to Greek nights. Life was public, noisy, and bright by day, but darkness brought vulnerability, stillness, and need to rest. Farmers collapsed from labor, sailors from rowing, scholars from thinking too hard. And no matter who you were, child, warrior, or philosopher, you eventually closed your eyes, hoping for dreams that comforted rather than tormented. Your body grows heavier as you imagine curling into one of those modest beds. The oil lamp flickers, then dies, leaving you in near-perfect blackness. A dog pads softly across the room, settling near your feet. Outside, the cicadas keep their rattling chorus, relentless but somehow soothing. It's the kind of sound you stop noticing the moment you give yourself permission to drift. You smile at the idea that Socrates might still be whispering in your dreams tonight, pestering you with questions even as you snooze. Maybe Aristotle is shaking his head somewhere, cataloging your subconscious like it's just another natural phenomenon. Or perhaps you're floating with Morpheus, god of dreams, who wraps you in wings of mist and carries you across an endless horizon. The debate fades, the myths fade, the stars themselves blur. What remains is the simplest truth. Even in Greece, the land of restless thinkers, everyone needed to shut up and go to bed eventually. And so do you. Cobblestones echo under your sandals as you wander into a city that never really sleeps, though it pretends to. This is Rome, not in its midday thunder of marching legions and gossiping senators, but at midnight, when torchlight flickers against marble columns and shadows stretch into corners that no architect ever meant to highlight. The air smells faintly of smoke, spiced wine, and the faintly sour tang of humanity crammed into one ambitious empire. You're walking the streets of ancient Rome at night, a little lost, a little curious, and definitely aware that this place has stories tucked into every arch and alleyway. The day here is all bluster, tribunals, markets, political shouting matches in the forum. But night peels that away. The taverns hum with laughter and dice games, their doors spilling light onto uneven stones. Prostitutes call from shaded doorways, their voices teasing as casually as vendors hawking figs. Stray dogs trot in packs, their nails clicking as they hunt scraps. Somewhere, an aqueduct hums faintly with water rushing through, like the city's own lullaby. And here's a solid historical fact. Romans were often biphasic sleepers. Instead of one long snooze, many citizens slept in two chunks. They'd go to bed not long after dusk, wake for a few hours around midnight, sometimes to pray, eat, chat, or yes, sneak into taverns, and then drift back down until dawn. If you've ever found yourself waking at 3 a.m. and scrolling your phone, congratulations, you're living like a Roman without the marble columns. Somewhere in the Sabura, the crowded working-class district, a family huddles together on straw mattresses. The noise of the city filters in clattering wagons, drunkards singing off-key, a baby crying 2 doors down. Privacy is scarce, but exhaustion is plentiful. You imagine curling up on the edge of that crowded bed, your knees tucked tight, drifting off despite the chaos, because that's simply how life is lived here, side by side, noise and all. But let's wander further, past the respectable neighborhoods where senators reside. Their villas are quiet now, mosaics glowing softly in lamplight. Slaves move like shadows, tending fires or carrying messages. One pauses, gazing at the stars through an open courtyard, and you can almost feel the shared longing for sleep, for peace, for something beyond endless labor. Historians still argue whether slaves in Rome were ever granted consistent rest, or if their nights were fragmented into duty and stolen naps. Either way, the heaviness in that shadow's shoulders is unmistakable. Then, of course, there are the watchmen. Cloaked figures pacing the streets, their torches guttering in the wind. Their job is to keep peace, but sometimes they're the very trouble you fear running into. You sidestep into a doorway as 2 pass by, muttering about a brawl near the Circus Maximus. And you realize Rome's nights, for all their grandeur, could be downright dangerous. Fires, fights, theft, it was all part of the landscape, the city's heartbeat under moonlight. Now, a quirky tidbit, Romans believed lettuce made you sleepy. Yes, lettuce. Pliny the Elder wrote about it, praising its drowsy powers. Wealthy households sometimes served it at dinner's end, a kind of edible lullaby. So if you're struggling to sleep tonight, maybe skip the chamomile and try a salad. Just don't expect Caesar dressing to be historically accurate. But even in this buzzing metropolis, you stumble across softer moments. A poet scribbles by lamplight, searching for the right line before drowsiness claims him. Ovid, perhaps, or someone like him, writing verses that will outlive the empire itself. The wax tablet tilts, the stylus wobbles, and his eyes finally close, dreams mingling with half-finished metaphors. There's something soothing about the idea that even geniuses couldn't always resist the pull of sleep mid-sentence. Nearby, a temple glows faintly. Inside, a priestess offers prayers to Somnus, the god of sleep, begging for peaceful dreams for her patrons. You linger at the threshold, imagining the incense filling the air, sweet heavy, almost narcotic. Worshipping sleep itself may seem strange, but in a city where rest is never guaranteed, it makes perfect sense. Maybe you've wished for the same without realizing it, whispering to your pillow like a god. Your path takes you to the Tiber's edge. The river glimmers under starlight, black and silver like a spilled bottle of ink. Fishermen's boats knock gently against piers, their nets already drying for tomorrow's labor. Somewhere across the water, a wolf howls, or maybe it's just a dog, but you smile anyway at the myth of Romulus and Remus, suckled by a she-wolf, the origin story of this sprawling, sleepless empire. Even bedtime stories here become the foundation of nations. You lean against a column, feeling your body heavy with the hour. The tavern's locator fades. The watchmen vanish around a corner. The city exhales for just a moment, a rare pause in its eternal motion. You realize the Romans weren't so different from you, finding scraps of quiet between the noise, clinging to rituals, whether lettuce or midnight prayers, to make the world feel manageable enough to drift away. The torch besiegt you sputters out, plunging the street into darkness. You tilt your head back, catching the faintest shimmer of constellations. They look the same ones you saw over Greece, the same ones traced in Egypt. Continuity again. Across empires, across centuries, the stars have been the one consistent nightlight, free and patient. And then, without meaning to, you yawn. The city has infected you with its rhythm, half awake, half dreaming, walking its streets like another restless Roman soul. You close your eyes, hearing the river, smelling the smoke, sensing the layered heartbeat of humanity stacked into stone. And even Rome, mighty and restless, eventually lets you drift. The air grows damp as you step away from Rome's bustling avenues and find yourself inside the hushed corridors of a medieval castle. The torchlight flickers against stone walls, so thick they muffle even the wind. You feel the chill immediately, no matter how many roaring fires the servants light. These drafty chambers never quite warm up. Your breath puffs like smoke, and you suddenly understand why so many portraits from this era show people layered in furs, cloaks, and enough fabric to qualify as personal insulation. Daytime here is filled with clangs and commotion, blacksmiths hammering, guards clattering across courtyards, dogs barking as chickens clatter in terror. But night transforms the castle into something altogether different. Shadows climb over tapestries, echoing footsteps seem louder than they should, and silence isn't silence at all. It's filled with whispers of distant owls and the occasional thud of something mysterious in the rafters. You can't tell if it's rats, bats, or restless ghosts. Honestly, in a castle, all three are on the table. People begin to settle down. In the great hall, the remains of supper are cleared away. Trenchers of bread, now soggy with gravy, are tossed to the dogs. The fire smolders low, filling the air with the scent of charred wood and roasted meat. Servants scurry, wiping down long oak tables, their footsteps quick and nervous, as though lingering too long after hours might invite spirits. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Castles were not designed for comfort. Most lords and ladies slept in bedchambers with heavy curtains drawn around their beds to block out drafts and nosy servants alike. Those curtains weren't for romance, they were survival gear against icy air seeping through stone walls. And if you've ever thought medieval life was glamorous, try waking up with frost on the inside of your room. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, beds are nothing more than piles of straw, sometimes shared with the whole family. Privacy? Not a chance. Someone snores, another coughs, and a child kicks in their sleep. You picture yourself huddling under a thin wool blanket, pulling it tighter against the cold while dreaming of something warmer, maybe a loaf of fresh bread, maybe the impossible luxury of a private bed. Of course, the night isn't just about sleeping. After a feast, people often told stories, and not just the cheerful kind. Ghost tales, riddles, and cautionary fables were the evening's entertainment. Imagine trying to fall asleep after hearing about headless knights haunting the battlements or demons creeping through keyholes. Historians still argue whether these stories were meant to scare children into obedience or simply provide adults with a little thrill. Either way, bedtime in a castle could feel like living in a horror movie marathon. Then there were the animals. Yes, animals, because castles were not just homes but fortresses, farms, and villages all rolled into one. Cats prowled halls chasing mice, dogs sprawled near fireplaces, and chickens sometimes found their way indoors. If you've ever tried to sleep while a rooster misjudges the time and crows at 2 a.m, you know exactly what medieval nights sounded like. A quirky tidbit for you: people sometimes slept with amulets or charms tucked under their pillows to ward off nightmares. One popular belief was that placing a piece of iron near your bed could keep away evil spirits. So if you've ever accidentally fallen asleep next to your laptop, maybe you are unknowingly protected by the same medieval logic. You climb a winding staircase now, your hand trailing along the cold stone. Higher and higher until you reach a tower chamber, the Lord's private quarters. The bed dominates the space, high and ornate, with embroidered sheets that only the wealthy could afford. Outside the window, the moon hangs pale above the ramparts, casting light across the courtyard area. Guards pace along the walls, their torches glowing like fireflies in the distance. Even kings and queens slept lightly, always aware of threats from outside or betrayal within. And Tainterest the music. In some halls, minstrels strum lutes or recite ballads until the last noble yawns and waves them away. The songs are often of love, chivalry, or epic battles, romantic, tragic, and just a little bit exaggerated. You imagine curling under heavy blankets, the tunes still echoing in your ears as sleep creeps closer. But the stillness never lasts. A drift sneaks under the door, rustling the curtains. Somewhere in the castle, a hyena groans like a voice. You realize how easy it would be to believe in ghosts here. The words are too thick, the night too dark, the imagination took. You wouldn't be the first to wake up sweating, convinced a phantom knight was standing at your bedside. And yet, beneath all that unease, there's something comforting about medieval sleep. Families bundled together for warmth, communities linked by stories and superstition, everyone tucked into the same rhythm of firelight and darkness. No glowing clocks, no buzzing notifications, just the raw cycle of day and night, life and dream. You settle yourself into the imaginary bed, heavy curtains closing around you. The fire pops on, tent queets. The sounds of the castle fade into the hush of sleep. For a moment, you are lord and servant, dreamer and god, part of a living fortress that breathes even in slumber. And with the cold pressing close and the weight of history above you, your eyelids grow heavy. You blink against the smoke and realize you've traded the damp stone of castles for the rough-hewn beams of a Viking longhouse. The shift is sudden. You're wrapped in the smell of charred wood, salted fish, and the tang of unwashed wool. The walls are built of timber planks sealed with turf, and the roof above you is so thick with smoke stains it looks like the ceiling itself has been toasted. The air is warm, almost suffocating, but oddly comforting, like you're wrapped in an ancient blanket that hasn't been washed since last season. Because, well, it hasn't. The Longhouse is alive, even at night. Families cluster together on raised wooden platforms, straw and furs spread beneath them for bedding. Children squirm under layers of pelts, mothers hum lullabies that sound more like chants, and fathers snore loudly enough to drown out the crackling fire. Chickens shuffle in corners, goats bleat softly, and somewhere a dog sighs as if it's had the hardest day of all. Privacy is a modern fantasy. Here you sleep shoulder to shoulder, nose to armpit, with every relative you've ever known and a few animals too stubborn to leave. Here's your solid historical fact. Viking homes often housed both people and livestock under the same roof during cold months. The logic was simple. Body heat equals survival. So when you imagine drifting off in this smoky room, remember that a cow might literally be your roommate, offering you warmth in exchange for smelling like, well, a cow. The fire in the center pit glows low, sending curls of smoke up through the hole in the roof. You cough a little, no surprise, since historians note that longhouses could get so smoky people developed chronic respiratory issues. Still, the fire is the heart of the household. Its embers glow red, casting shadows across wooden beams, while the smell of charred oak becomes the lullaby of the north. You listen as voices murmur in the half-dark. Old men trade sagas, their voices gravelly, weaving tales of Odin's wanderings, Thor's battles, or Loki's tricks. Each story is both entertainment and education, shaping the children who drift to sleep nearby. And like all good stories, they stretch the truth just enough to keep the audience hooked. Imagine falling asleep with giants, dragons, and gods swirling in your imagination. It's the Viking version of Netflix, though, with fewer ads and a lot more beheadings. A quirky tidbit: Vikings sometimes used dreamfish as charms, hanging dried fish bones near the bed to encourage prophetic dreams. Yes, you heard that right, dream-enhancing fish bones. Somewhere between endearing and unsettling, it shows just how deeply they valued visions from the other world. If you've ever woken from a bizarre dream and thought it must mean something, congratulations! You and a Viking would have gotten along fine. The Longhouse itself creaks as wind lashes the outside walls. You imagine yourself wrapped tightly in wool, listening to the storm howl beyond the turf roof. It's a sound both frightening and reassuring. Frightening because you know nature here is brutal, reassuring because you're inside part of a clan that shares everything: food, fire, warmth, and dreams. At some point, a skald, a traveling poet, begins to sing. His voice rises over the crackle of fire, chanting in rhythms that almost hypnotize you.
The children's eyes flutter, and even the warriors lean back, lost in memories of battles long past.
The song is a net, pulling everyone into the same dreamscape, a shared journey beyond the smoky rafters. You can't help but smile at the thought that these same warriors who charge into raids with axes swinging also need bedtime stories to settle their nerves. Historians still argue whether sagas were primarily historical records or creative embellishments, but here in the Longhouse you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is the way words soften the night, how tales bind a community tighter than any rope. The fire dwindles further, and with it, the room slips into deeper stillness.
The cows stop shifting. The goats queet.
Even the dogs curl into themselves. You sense the collective weight of the clan's fatigue pressing down, a single heartbeat shared across dozens of bodies. It's not glamorous, it's not comfortable by modern standards, but it's profoundly human. You settle onto a fur pelt, pulling it up to your chin. The smoke stings your eyes, but your body feels heavy, lulled by the warmth and the rhythm of voices fading into snores. Someone mutters in their sleep. A child whimpers, soothed instantly by a mother's gentle hand.
And above you the rafters creaks if effing the dreams of the sleeper below.
Outside, the storm continues, battering the fjord, tearing at the earth. But inside, the Longhouse holds steady, a fortress of wood and warmth against the cold void. Your eyelids drop. You drift toward that place where sagas blend with personal dreams, where gods and ancestors meet in smoky visions. And as you fade, you realize even Vikings, fierce as they were, needed to rest, to recharge, to dream. Beneath the armor and raids, they were just like you, searching for a soft place to lay their head, even if it smelled faintly of cow. The smoke of the Longhouse thins into dry desert air, and suddenly your sandals crunch on shifting grains of sand beneath an endless sky. You've found yourself along the legendary Silk Road, that sprawling artery of trade stretching from China through Central Asia to the Mediterranean. Here, nights are not quiet in the way you might expect. They hum with the shuffling of camels, the clink of pottery being loaded or unloaded, and the low murmur of countless tongues trading words as readily as they trade spices. The caravan halts for the evening, and you watch as traders begin the ritual of setting up camp. Bright rugs are unrolled onto sand as though trying to pin down the desert itself. Brass pots glint in firelight, while sacks of silk, tea, and fragrant herbs are stacked into neat little mountains. You find yourself in a crossroads of civilizations, where Persian merchants gossip with Indian jewelers, Chinese traders sip tea with Arab scholars, and the common language is laughter mixed with haggling. Here's your solid historical fact: the Silk Road wasn't just about silk. Yes, it gave the route its name, but caravans carried everything from paper and gunpowder to glassware and gold. More importantly, they carried ideas. Buddhism traveled this way, as did medical knowledge, astrology, and even recipes for noodles that would one day evolve into pasta. Imagine falling asleep surrounded not just by goods, but by entire cultures, swapping bedtime stories. The fire crackles in the center of camp, and you lower yourself onto a woven rug. Around you, camels groan like irritated old men being asked to do just one more chore. Their smell is unforgettable, pungent, sour, yet somehow grounding. A boy hums a tune as he brushes their rough coats, while another sprinkles salt into a pot where stew bubbles gently. The air thickens with the aroma of lamb and cumin, and your stomach growls in sympathy. You're drawn to a circle of storytellers because, of course, what else would people do after a long day's march? One man gestures grandly, telling of Alexander the Great who once marched through these same deserts. Another weaves a tale of dragons lurking in the mountains, their scales glinting like jewels in torchlight. Children gape, their eyes wide, as if believing every word. And you realize half the point of such stories is not to teach or explain, but to keep everyone awake just long enough for guards to settle in and danger to feel further away. A quirky tidbit: some caravans employed professional dream interpreters. Imagine that job title on your business card. Traders believed dreams along the Silk Road carried messages about journeys, omens, or deals. If a merchant dreamed of falling sand, it might mean trouble with contracts. If he dreamed of water, maybe a sign of prosperity. Whether they believed fully or just used it as entertainment, the role existed, making nighttime as filled with commerce as daylight. Beyond the fire, the desert stretches into infinity. The stars blaze, so bricht Time hört your eyes. There is no city smoke here, no torchlight to dull them. Constellations spill across the sky in dazzling clarity. Orion strides, Cassiopeia reclines. The Milky Way is a shimmering river that mirrors the trade routes below. You lay back on a rug, your head cushioned by a folded cloak, and suddenly the desert no longer feels barren. It feels like a cathedral of sand and stars. The caravan quiets as more people slip into slumber. You hear the steady chewing of camels, the rhythmic jingling of bells tied to their harnesses, and the occasional cough from a tent. Traders curl under blankets of wool and silk, pulling them close against the chill. Because here's another truth: deserts are cruel tricksters. Scorching by day, freezing by night. You tug your cloak tighter and feel your body surrender to the cold in waves. Historians still argue whether caravans were primarily driven by profit or by curiosity. Did people endure these endless treks solely for gold and goods, or was there a hunger for knowledge, for connection, for seeing what lay beyond the horizon? You realize, staring at the constellations, that maybe both are true. Humans chase survival and wonder in equal measure, and nowhere is that clearer than along this road. You roll onto your side, facing the fire. The last pot of stew has been scraped clean. Embers glowreat, popping softly. A dog curls near the flames, twitching in dreams of chasing gazelles. An old man pulls his cloak tighter, his beard rising and falling with slow breaths. The hush is complete, yet alive, a communal silence shared across dozens of souls. And you lying there on the desert's was-tiling, felt your slipping. The wind brushes sand across your cake, a whisper softer than any lullaby.
The weight of travel, trade, and tales presses down gently, lulling you toward that ancient place where dreams meet the road. The Silk Road is alive, even in sleep. And now, so are your dreams. The desert air fades, and suddenly you hear the lapping of water against wooden beams. The Silk Road has guided you not just across land but onto the sea, where another artery of exchange pulses with life, the great maritime routes of the Indian Ocean. You stand barefoot on a dock in a bustling medieval port, perhaps Calicut in India or Aden in Yemen, where the smell of salt mixes with peppercorns, cinnamon, and the faint stink of drying fish. The dock creaks as sailors unload amphorae of wine, crates of porcelain, and bundles of spices wrapped in banana leaves. You realize this place is no less alive than the caravanserai you just left. You wander onto a ship, its hull broad and sturdy, sails patched but proud. These dhows and junks crisscross the sea, linking Africa, Arabia, India, and China into one giant floating market. A solid fact for you: by the 14th century, the Indian Ocean Trade Network was the largest maritime trading system in the world, even bigger than the Mediterranean.
And unlike the storm-tossed Atlantic you're probably imagining, these seas had a secret helper, the monsoon winds. Merchants learned to ride these seasonal breezes like clockwork, heading west in one season, east in the other. You admire their patience, wait too long, and you're stuck sipping tea in port for 6 months.
The ship rocks gently as you explore. Coils of rope lie piled like sleeping serpents.
Barrels of fresh water line the deck, each one guarded as carefully as treasure. A parrot squawks from its perch, probably regretting its life choices as sailors laugh and toss it scraps of fruit. Below deck, the hold smells of pepper so strong it makes your nose tingle. You lean close to a sack and realize black pepper was once called black gold, so valuable it was used as currency.
Imagine paying your rent with a teaspoon of spice.
Your landlord might be less amused, but hey, worth a try. The sailors invite you to join their evening meal. They pass around bowls of rice flavored with dried fish and spices that make your tongue burn and your heart glow. One sailor tells you of strange lands where the people wear feathered cloaks, another insists he saw a whale larger than a village. You nod politely, deciding not to question the accuracy because really, why ruin the fun?
As night falls, lanterns sway from the masts, casting circles of gold across the dark waves. The horizon disappears, leaving you inside a dome of stars and water.
You realize how terrifying it must have felt to trust wood and rope against the infinity of the ocean. Yet here's a quirky tidbit. Some ships carried cats as essential crew members, not just for companionship, but because cats kept the rat population in check. Without cats, rats might chew through ropes or eat precious grain. So technically, whiskered sailors helped keep the world's largest trade network afloat.
They see homes with life.
Dolphins leap beside the hull, their sleek bodies silver in the moonlight. Somewhere far below, you imagine whales singing, their calls traveling for miles in the dark water. The rocking of the ship lulls you into a trance, as though the ocean itself is cradling you.
You lie down on a woven mat,
the deck warm from the day sun, and late the ship's right more breathing. But even here uncertainty lingers. Historians still argue whether the Indian Ocean route spread religion by deliberate missionary efforts or simply through the quiet influence of merchants and sailors. Did Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity expand here because people preached or because they traded, married locally, and blended cultures? You gaze at the men around you, their different languages weaving into one sleepy chorus, and think maybe both. Faith and goods often travel in the same bundle.
The night deepens.
A sailor strums a simple tune on a stringed instrument, each note soft as waves against wood. Another hums along, his voice low and rough, while the parrot, never one to be excluded, squawks loudly in what you swear is the wrong key.
Laukheiter spreads across the deck, and for a moment you feel the ocean's lanolins vanish.
Humans are endlessly good at making the strange feel like home, even on a floating box of timber in the middle of endless water.
You stretch out, head against a coiled rope,
eyes fixed on the constellations.
The ship creaks, the water laps, and the lanterns flicker with the wind.
The scent of pepper and salt mingles into something oddly soothing.
Your body grows heavy, sinking into the rocking deck.
It feels almost like being in a cradle, rocked gently by a parent too ancient and vast to see. Sleep approaches, the kind that rolls in like a tide, slow, steady, irresistible. The sailors around you drift off, some snoring, some murmuring in half-dreams. The parrot finally quiets, feathers ruffled, head tucked under wing. The sea itself seems to hush, holding its breath as you slip across the boundary into dreams.
The Indian Ocean carries you not just toward new ports, but deeper into rest.
The salt spray fades, and you blink awake beneath the rising silhouette of summiting monumental. No sights, no routines, this time just stone upon stone, reeling for the heavens. You've arrived in the shadow of the pyramids of Giza, those ancient monuments that have haunted imaginations for over 4,000 years. Sand crunches underfoot, dry and fine, and the desert air hums with cicadas and the distant bray of a donkey cart. The horizon blurs into golden haze, but the pyramids cut through it like frozen sunbeams, eternal and immovable. You stand close enough to touch the limestone blocks, and you're struck not by the majesty, but by the sheer size of each stone. These things are massive, some weighing over 2 tons. You run your hand across the rough surface and imagine the laborers who hauled them up ramps, sweating under the sun. A solid historical fact for you: contrary to popular myth, the pyramids weren't built by slaves chained to whips. Most modern archaeologists agree they were constructed by tens of thousands of skilled workers, probably farmers during the off-season, who were paid in bread, beer, and housing. Imagine clocking in for pyramid duty with a loaf of bread under your arm and a buzz from last night's beer.
The sandipsalor casting the stones in copper light.
You hear the clatter of tools, chisels, hammers, and the grunt of men pushing sledges across wooden planks slicked with water. That's another quirky tidbit. Ancient workers figured out that pouring water over the sand reduced friction, making it easier to drag heavy loads. Science hidden in plain sight, a trick that might have saved them thousands of aching backs. You climb a few steps onto the lower stones, careful not to trip. From here, you can see the Sphinx crouching nearby, its lion body and human head half buried in drifting sand. Its nose is missing, of course. You can't help think of all the jokes about someone sneezing too hard. Some say Napoleon's troops blasted it off, but historians still argue whether it was destroyed in battle, eroded naturally, or defaced centuries earlier by religious zealots. You lean closer to the ancient face, imagining the layers of stories etched into its silence. The day fades into evening and workers set down their tools. Fires are lit and the smell of roasting onions and garlic fills the camp. Laborers sit in circles, chewing bread and drinking mugs of beer so thick it might count as soup. Laughter ripples through the desert, and you realize this construction site was also a community, buzzing with songs, families, and gossip. A stray dog curls beside a fire, hoping for scraps. You sit among them, chewing bread that tastes dry but comforting, and sip beer that tastes like liquid bread with a kick. A storyteller begins his nightly ritual, gesturing toward the massive stones looming behind him. He claims the pyramids are ladders for the pharaoh's souls, stairways guiding them to the stars. Others whisper wild ideas that the pyramids hum with secret powers, or that they are aligned with constellations for reasons lost to time. You feel the weight of mystery pressing in, the kind that makes you tilt your head toward the heavens and wonder. The sky darkens and stars blink awake. The desert transforms under moonlight, soft and silver, the pyramids glowing faintly like sleeping giants. You lay back on a mat, listening to the sounds of the camp, distant flute music, the shuffle of sandals, the hush of wind across stone. The pyramids loom above, their sharp edges softened into dreamlike silhouettes. Your mind drifts with the rhythm of history. The workers around you hum lullabies, their voices weaving through the warm air. A child giggles, then quiets as her mother strokes her hair. The dog snores, tight twitching in dreams. You close your eyes and imagine lying inside the cool chambers of the pyramid, surrounded by carvings of stars, jackals, and eternal boats meant to sail across the afterlife. Historians still argue whether the pyramids were primarily tombs or something more, a cosmic clock, a map of the heavens, a monument to immortality. As you drift, the debate doesn't matter. What matters is how small you feel, lying beneath structures that have outlasted empires, plagues, and every passing worry of humanity. The desert breeze softens, carrying whispers of sand across your skin. The pyramids stand eternal, their shadows wrapping you like a blanket. You let the ancient hush sink into your bones, and your breathing slows, as steady as the stars. Sleep feels inevitable here, as if even your dreams must bow to the weight of stone and time. The night at Gaza holds you, just as it has held countless dreamers before. The desert hush drifts away, and suddenly you're surrounded by the faint echo of waves crashing against marble walls. You find yourself in the bustling heart of Athens centuries ago, when the city pulsed with voices debating philosophy, drama, and democracy itself. The Acropolis rises before you, its columns bathed in golden sunlight. Dust clings to your sandals as you climb the steps, weaving through merchants hawking olives, figs, and honey cakes. The air hums with excitement, and you realize this city thrives not just on trade or temples, but on ideas. Here's your solid historical fact. Athens in the 5th century BCE was the birthplace of democracy, though not the kind you'd recognize on election day. Only free male citizens could vote. Women, slaves, and foreigners were left out. Still, compared to the monarchies and tyrannies elsewhere, this was revolutionary. You imagine how radical it must have felt to gather in an open space and argue about laws instead of waiting for a king's decree. The agora spreads before you, the city's marketplace and meeting ground. Stalls overflow with pottery painted in black and red, each vessel telling stories of gods, heroes, and very dramatic dinner parties. The scent of grilled lamb and honey drizzled over pastries wafts through the crowd, making your stomach rumble. Musicians pluck lyres, their melodies weaving through the chatter of citizens. You hear one man loudly complaining about taxes, proof that some things never change. You're drawn to a circle of listeners where a bearded man speaks with calm authority. It's Socrates, or at least someone who looks suspiciously like him. He asks more questions than he gives answers, nudging his students to trip over their own contradictions. You lean in, fascinate. A quirky tidbit here, Socrates never wrote anything down. Everything we know about him comes from his students, especially Plato. It's like building an entire legacy from second-hand gossip, though admittedly very intellectual gossip. The Zandipsalo and the Tatars. You follow the crowd to the Tata of Dionysus carved into the hillside. Wooden benches creak as thousands settle in, the air buzzing with anticipation. A chorus of masked actors steps onto the stage, their voices carrying to the highest rows. They sing of tragedy, fate, and gods who toy with human lives like dice. You watch, mesmerized, as torches flicker against masks frozen in eternal expressions. As the play unfolds, you glance around and notice people dabbing at their eyes, others laughing at clever lines. Theater here isn't just entertainment, it's a civic duty, a way to reflect on society itself. Historians still argue whether Greek theater was primarily religious ritual or a political tool disguised as art. Either way, it feels strangely modern, people gathering to laugh, cry, and maybe question their leaders. Night falls over Athens, but the city doesn't sleep yet. Lanterns glow along narrow streets. You wander into a symposium, essentially a wine-fueled party for philosophers and poets. Reclining couches circle the room, and clay cups brim with diluted wine. Someone strums a lyre while another recites poetry about unrequited love. Apparently, even ancient Greeks needed sad love songs. You sip the wine, which tastes both sour and sweet, and laugh quietly at a drunken man trying to debate metaphysics while hiccuping. Outside, the city creaks at last. You lie on a rooftop, cool tales benat your back, gazing at the stars. The Parthenon looms above, its columns stark against the night sky. You think of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, watching over her city. The bright carries the scent of olive trees, and the sombre below a dog barks lazily. You let your mind drift. The arguments in the agora, the laughter in the theater, the music of the symposium, they all fade into a rhythm, steady and soothing. Athens whispers not with monuments or stone, but with ideas still alive thousands of years later. Your breathing matches the hush of the city, slow and even, as sleep begins to press gently at the edges of your awareness. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize democracy, philosophy, theater, they're not dusty relics. They're lullabies written by a restless city still humming in your dreams tonight. The murmur of Athens dissolves, and now you hear the roar of water rushing through stone arches. You open your eyes to find yourself standing in the heart of ancient Rome, where aqueducts stretch across the landscape like colossal stone bridges, carrying life itself into the city. The ground vibrates faintly beneath your sandals as carts rumble along cobblestone roads. Marble statues gleam in the sunlight, while vendors shout above the din of the crowd. Rome, bustling and proud, demands your attention with every sense you have. You wander toward the Forum, the Centre of Politics, Religion and Commerce collide. Senators in pristine togas stride past, their faces stern as though every step carries the weight of empire. Merchants wave at you, offering figs, olive oil, and bronze trinkets shaped like eagles. A boy darts past carrying an amphory almost as tall as himself, muttering complaints about his aching back. You grin, because clearly child labor jokes existed long before TikTok. Here's a solid historical fact. At its height, Rome's aqueduct system stretched for hundreds of miles, delivering fresh water to fountains, baths, and homes. Without it, the city's population, over 1 million at its peak, would have been impossible. Imagine the engineering. Precise gradients carved across valleys, tunnels burrowed through mountains, all without modern machinery. You can almost hear the pride and the murmurs of citizens filling their pitchers at public fountains, grateful for the empire's ingenuity. You're pulled toward the Colosseum, its massive arches casting long shadows as the sun shifts. The air inside is thick with anticipation. Crowds press together, shouting and waving, their cheers shaking the very walls. Sind crunches under your fight as you step into the arena itself, the stage for gladiators and wild beasts. The head radiates from the stone, the roar of the people vibrating through your chest. And yet, here's a quirky tidbit. Not every Colosseum event was bloody. Sometimes the Romans flooded the arena for mock naval battles, filling it with water so miniature warships could clash in front of tens of thousands of spectators. Imagine the absurd logistics, sailors rowing in circles while vendors still try to sell you honey cakes in the stands. You can't help but chuckle at the image of soggy gladiators slipping around like it's the world's deadliest water park. The crowd-tense evening comes, and you escape into quieter streets. The smell of bread drifts from a bakery, mingling with the sharper tang of garum, Rome's infamous fermented fish sauce. A group of children play dice on the pavement, laughing as one of them dramatically accuses another of cheating. You pause to watch, realizing that despite marble temples and imperial banners, life here is full of small, ordinary joys. Night falls and lamps glow along the streets. You find yourself drawn to the public baths, one of Rome's most beloved institutions. You step inside and are enveloped in steam. The air smells faintly of oil and herbs, while voices echo against tiled walls. Citizens recline in pools of varying temperatures, hot, warm, cool, moving between them like a ritual. You lower yourself into the water, and the heat melts the day's weight from your muscles. Around you, conversations drift, politics, gossip, arguments about chariot races. Someone hums a tune that carries lazily through the steam. Historians still argue whether Rome's vast infrastructure, roads, baths, aqueducts, was built primarily for practical governance or as propaganda to awe citizens into loyalty. You close your eyes in the bath, thinking perhaps it was both. A hot soak after a long day can make anyone more forgiving of taxes. Later, you step outside into Rome's quieter corners. The Palatine Hill looms in the distance, dotted with imperial palaces. You lie back on a patch of grass, the city stretching out below like a sea of flickering lights. The Tiber glimmers faintly in the moonlight. You listen to the faint sounds of revelers still awake, laughter, liars, the occasional shouted curse about a lost bet at the races.
The night air cools your skin and you let the city's ash settle into your breathing.
Rome feels eternal, its stones whispering with the voices of millions who lived, loved, and dreamed here before you. Your eyes grow heavy and you sink into sleep as steady as the aqueducts carrying water through the dark.
Rome, with all its noise and glory, has become your lullaby.
The hum of Rome's baths fades, and now you find yourself standing at the edge of the world as the Romans once imagined it. Waves crash against steep cliffs, and gulls wheel above, their cries sharp against the wind. You stepped into the age of the Norse seafarers, the Vikings, those restless souls who stitched together the cold edges of Europe with long ships carved like dragons. The air smells of brine and tar, and somewhere in the distance men's voices rise in rough song, steady as the beat of oars. You tread across a wooden dock slick with seawater. A long ship rests beside it, its prow carved into a serpent's head, eyes glaring as though daring the sea itself. The hull is slender yet sturdy, built to cut through both ocean waves and shallow rivers. You run your hand along the wood, the surface smooth from years of oiling. Here's your solid historical fact. Viking longships were marvels of engineering, light enough to be carried over land, yet strong enough to cross the North Atlantic. Without them, raids, trade, and exploration would have been impossible. The men preparing to leave wear cloaks against the chill, their beards bristling with frost. Some carry axes, others bundles of furs or barrels of salted fish. Children chase each other on the shore, laughing despite the cold. A dog barks, eager to join the voyage, though no one seems inclined to bring him aboard. A quirky tidbit for you, some Viking burials included dogs, believed to guide their masters into the afterlife. Dogs didn't just guard homes, they guarded souls. You glance back at the animal wagging its tail and hope it doesn't know too much about funeral customs.
The ship shoves off and you clamber aboard. Oars dip into the water in unison, creaking wood keeping time with the men's chant.
The sea stretches before you, endless and grey, the sky low and heavy. Salt spray dampens your cloak and the cold gnaws at your bones. Yet the rhythm of rowing, the unity of movement, creates a strange calm. You close your eyes and let the ship's rocking lull you, like being rocked in an enormous cradle made of oak and salt water. The day fades and the crew lowers their oars, letting the wind carry the sail. A stew of fish and barley simmers in a pot, it smells earthy and comforting. The men eat with their hands, tearing bread, sipping ale from horns, and occasionally smacking each other on the shoulder in bursts of laughter. One sings of Odin's wisdom, another tells a bawdy joke about Thor that makes the group roar.
You can't help but laugh too, though you hope Thor isn't listening.
As night settles, the stars pierce the clouds. Navigation here depends not on maps but memory, the alignment of stars and the feel of the sea itself.
One sailor points out Parlors, steady and constant the diet for countless voyages.
Historians still argue whether the Vikings reached North America by accident, blown off course, or by deliberate navigation. You tilt your head back, staring at the North Star, and tinker forgets het eindelijk kan verwen. The only thing between you and oblivion is a flickering point of light. Sleep creeps closer, but the ship remains alive. Men take turns at watch, their silhouettes black against the starlight. The sail flutters softly, the wood groans with each swell. Somewhere below deck a man snores like thunder, while another hums a lullaby in a language both harsh and tender. You curl on a bench, cloak pulled tight, the planks warm from so many bodies pressed close through the day. The ship cuts forward steadily, like a hotbed against the sea. You imagine tomorrow, my errett, my betreut, my benulens unseen. For now, though, there is only the hush of water, the whisper of wind in the rigging, and the slow, heavy pull of sleep. The Norsemen sail into the night, and you sail with them, your dreams carried on dragon-headed waves. The creak of the longship fades, and when you open your eyes, the salt spray has been replaced by the scent of incense and the cool hush of stone corridors. You're walking beneath pointed arches, the echo of your footsteps swallowed by the vast stillness of a medieval cathedral. Light pours through stained glass windows, painting the floor in jewel-colored patches, sapphire, ruby, emerald, like you're strolling across a giant kaleidoscope. A hush settles in your chest, equal parts awe and sleepiness. The cathedral soars above you, ribbed vaults climbing so high they seem to disappear into heaven itself. Bells toll faintly in the distance, their sound rolling through the town beyond. Here's your solid historical fact. Gothic cathedrals were feats of engineering as much as devotion. Flying buttresses, those skeletal arms bracing the walls, allowed builders to construct impossibly tall structures with vast windows. Without them, the weight of stone would have crushed the walls inward. You glance at those graceful arches and can't help but marvel at how faith and physics teamed up to make skyscrapers of the Middle Ages. Candles flicker along the nave, their scent of beeswax mingling with incense. Monks shuffle past, their sandals whispering on stone. One carries a book chained to a lectern, its pages thick and yellowed. You lean closer and notice it's hand-copied, every letter drawn with patience, every margin decorated with tiny animals and vines. A quirky tidbit here, some monks slipped jokes into the margins, little doodles of snails attacking knights or cats chasing mice across sacred texts. Even in solemn devotion, humans couldn't resist a little mischief. You move into the cloister where the night is falling gently over the courtyard garden. Herbs grow in neat squares, sage, rosemary, lavender. A fountain murmurs at the center, its water soft against the quiet. Birds roost in the eaves, their feathers rustling as they settle. A monk sits on a bench, humming a hymn that drifts like a lullaby. The tune makes your eyelids heavy, and you sit beside him, listening as though the stone itself is singing. Later, the cathedral fills with the glow of lanterns for Compline, the last prayer of the day. Monks chant in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves. The Latin words blur together, less language to steady and soothing. The sound seems to vibrate in your bones, erasing the chatter of your thoughts. You breathe slower, your heart sinking with the chant. For a moment, you feel what generations must have felt, that this music is as close to heaven as earth can reach. Historians still argue whether Gothic cathedrals were primarily houses of worship or deliberate displays of civic pride. Were they built to glorify God alone, or also to proclaim a town's wealth and power? You look up at the vaulted ceiling, ribs crisscrossing like the skeleton of some giant beast, and think, maybe it doesn't matter. The effect is the same. You feel very small, very quiet, and very willing to let sleep tiptoe in. The service ends and the monks drift away, their figures fading into the shadows. The candle is borne low. You lie down on a wooden pew, the surface hard but strangely comforting. Colored moonlight, filtered through stained glass, washes over you in soft blues and purples. The fountain outside gurgles faintly, a steady counterpoint to the hush within. You close your eyes, and in your mind you still see arches soaring, light streaming, and monks scribbling tiny jokes in margins. The cathedral becomes less a building and more a dream itself, vast, echoing, timeless. Your breathing slows until it matches the rhythm of the chant still humming in your memory. Here, among stone and silence, faith and fatigue, you finally let go. The cathedral keeps watch as you drift deeper into sleep. The cathedral's chant dissolves and you awaken to the distant jingle of bells and the soft clop of hooves on packed earth. Dawn light breaks across rolling fields, and in the distance you see banners snapping in the breeze above a high stone wall. You've wandered into the Middle Ages beyond cloisters and cathedrals, into the world of castles, knights, and the hum of village life clustered beneath towering battlements. The air smells of smoke from hearth fires mingled with the sharp tang of horses and hay. You approach the castle gates just as they creak open. Merchants shuffle in with carts laden with barrels of ale, bolts of cloth, and baskets of salted fish. Farmers arrive with turnips and chickens, their children running at their heels. A guard in chainmail yawns, leaning on his spear. You can't help but smile. Apparently not every night was gallant. Some were just tired of standing all night. Here's your solid historical fact. Castles weren't originally the sprawling fairy tale fortresses you imagine. Early ones were simple motte and bailey structures, wooden towers perched on mounds of earth surrounded by ditches. Stone came later when lords had the resources to build walls so thick they could shrug off battering rams. You run your hand across the rough limestone blocks of this keep, feeling the chill of centuries embedded in the stone. Inside the courtyard, life buzzes with energy. Blacksmith's hammer at glowing iron sparks leaping like fireflies. The clang rings through the yard, followed by the hiss of metal plunged into water. Women stir huge pots over open fires, the aroma of cabbage and barley wafting into the cool air. A boy chases a goose that clearly has no intention of being caught. It squawks indignantly, flapping around corners with surprising speed. You laugh, and a passing villager chuckles too, shrugging as if to say, "That goose always wins." You wander into the great hall, its high beams blackened from years of smoke. Long tables are laid out with trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread used as plates, ready for the evening meal. Wonderwells, colorful signs of hens, saints, and battles. Some look heroic, others just look like badly drawn horses. A quirky tidbit, medieval artists often weren't great at perspective, so you'll see cats the size of cows or knights wielding swords bigger than their torsos. It's as if the Middle Ages were illustrated by someone slightly tipsy but very enthusiastic. By afternoon, a commotion rises in the yard. A tournament is about to begin. Knights in shining armor mount horses, lances in hand, banners fluttering. Trumpets blare as they lower visors and charge, wood splintering as lances collide. The crowd gasps and cheers. You watch as a knight is unhorsed, landing with a thud that shakes the ground. He gets up, brushing dirt from his armor, and bows with dramatic flair. The crowd roars approval. You realize tournaments were as much performance as combat, a chance to show off skill and courage to the lords, and to impress the ladies watching from the stands. As the sun dips low, feasting begins. The hall fills with music, lute strummed, flutes piping, voices rising in song. Roasted meat is carved, bread passed around, and mugs of ale clink together. A jester capers before the high table, bells jingling as he tells jokes, some clever, some groan-worthy. You sip warm spiced wine, sweet on your tongue, and feel your body loosen with the rhythm of merriment. Historians still argue whether castles were primarily military fortresses or symbols of power meant to intimidate more than defend. As you sit in a hall, you think they were both, walls against enemies and stages for grandeur. The lords needed safety, but they also needed to impress everyone from visiting nobles to wandering storytellers. Later the music softens and the fire burns low. You step outside, the courtyard quiet now except for the occasional bark of a dog. The night air is cool, scented with wood smoke. Above the stars stretch weit and bricht und schallen get by city lights. You lie down on the grass beside the wall, stone radiating a faint warmth from the day's sun. The murmur of the feast fades behind you. The goose, victorious once again, nests smugly in a corner.
You smile, close your eyes, and let the hum of the castle sink into your bones. The night feels both safe and endless, the thick walls keeping out everything but sleep. The warmth of the castle hearth fades away, and when you next open your eyes, the world has shifted to winding cobblestone lanes, half-timbered houses leaning precariously toward one another as if gossiping over your head. The smell of fresh bread, damp hay, and a hint of sewage drifts through the air. Welcome to the medieval marketplace, where everything from silks to salted fish is on offer, and where noise itself seems to have taken up permanent residence. Merchants call out their wares with practiced rhythm: fine wool, imported spices, fresh eels still wriggling. The cacophony is oddly musical, layered like an orchestra of everyday survival. You sidestep a dog gnawing on a bone and nearly bump into a woman balancing a basket of onions on her head. Her glare could curdle milk, and you mutter an apology before slipping away. A juggler tosses bright apples in the air nearby, though one tumbles down and nearly takes out a chicken. The chicken wins the staring contest, strutting away in triumph. Here's your historical anchor. Medieval fairs were critical hubs of trade across Europe. The Champagne fairs in France, for example, linked merchants from Italy, Flanders, and beyond, creating early networks that would evolve into the foundations of international commerce. You look around and realize that behind the chaos of bargaining lies the very beginnings of globalization. Silk from the east, furs from the north, wine from the south, all of it meeting here, in muddy squares where the world felt both vast and small. You wander toward a spice stall where tiny cloth bags of cinnamon, pepper, and saffron are displayed like treasure. The merchant boasts that saffron is worth its weight in gold, which isn't entirely wrong. Spices often cost more than precious metals. You lean in to inhale the fragrance and sneeze violently, sending the merchant into dramatic complaints about scaring away his customers. A child laughs and you wink at them, happy to have provided free entertainment. The marketplace has its darker corners too. Beggars huddle near the church doors, hoping for alms. A man in ragged robes preaches about the end of days, while children chase each other through puddles, oblivious. A pickpocket brushes a little too close, but you catch the glint in their eye and pat your pouch protectively. The thief shrugs and vanishes into the crowd. You can't help but admire the audacity, though you also check your belt again, just in case. Quirky tidbit: medieval markets weren't just for goods, they were for gossip. Town criers announced news, scandals spread faster than wildfire, and occasionally bizarre entertainments appeared. One record tells of a man exhibiting a dancing bear, while another described a goose trained to pull tiny carts. You glance around almost expecting to see it, and though no goose carts appear today, you spot a man with a monkey wearing a little hat collecting coins. It feels just ridiculous enough to be real. As the day heats up, the smells intensify. Fishmongers wave their wares proudly, though the scent is less than appealing. Bakers pull loaves from ovens, their crusts crackling. Children beg for honey cakes, and you almost do too. You give in and buy one, biting into the sticky sweetness that clings to your fingers. It's a simple pleasure, timeless and comforting. A troupe of musicians sets up in the square, lutes, fiddles, and drums joining in raucous harmony. People begin to dance, skirts swirling, boots thumping the cobbles. The rhythm is infectious and you sway along, your body loosening in spite of yourself.
The lauter the clapping, the sheer energy of life here seeps into you.
Historians still argue whether these fairs and markets were primarily about commerce or about community. Were they proto-capitalist engines driving Europe toward modern economies, or were they social theaters, spaces where villages and towns could affirm their identity? Standing in the middle of the square, sugar on your lips and music in your ears, you think it's both. People came for profit, yes, but also for stories, for connection, for a chance to feel part of something larger.
Evening falls and lanterns are lit.
The marketplace greets stalls shattered one by one. Strätlis linger, lovers whispering in corners, drunks singing off-key, a stray dog gnawing the day scraps. You sit on a worn stone step, the ground still warm beneath you, and watch shadows stretch across the square. The last of the daylight glows on the rooftops, soft and fleeting.
You close your eyes.
The music still hums faintly in your memory, blending with the scent of cinnamon and smoke. The crowd's chatter lingers in your ears, fading to a soft murmur like waves on a shore. Wrapped in the warmth of the day, you sink deeper, your breath slowing until sleep itself feels like part of the bargain struck in this bustling, vanished market. The lanterns of the market dim into darkness, and when you stir again, you find yourself far from bustling trade squares and jingling coins. Instead, you're drifting down a quiet river beneath the pale wash of moonlight. The air is damp and still, the water carrying you past reeds that whisper secrets in the night. Ahead, rising against the darkened hills, stands a monastery, its walls austere, its towers unlit save for the faint glow of candles flickering in narrow windows. The silence feels deliberate, almost sacred, as if sound itself has been asked politely to step outside. You step ashore and follow a stone path up to the entrance. A heavy wooden door creaks open, revealing a monk holding a lantern. He says nothing, only nods and gestures you inside. The hall is cool, the stone floor smooth from centuries of sandaled feet. Shadows cling to the vaulted ceiling, while the faint aroma of beeswax and parchment fills the air. Here's your solid historical fact. Monasteries in the Middle Ages were not just spiritual retreats, they were centers of learning, agriculture, and innovation. Monks preserved ancient manuscripts by painstakingly copying them in scriptoria, ensuring that works of classical philosophers and poets survived into the modern age. You enter such a scriptorium now, where rows of desks stand beneath slanted windows, each illuminated by a single candle. A monk dips his quill into ink, scratching out letters so carefully you can almost hear the rhythm of patience itself. You lean closer and notice intricate illustrations blooming in the margins, teeny veins curling around golden initials, little birds perched on painted branches. Quirky tidbit, some monks doodled jokes or caricatures in these margins, hiding playful secrets in otherwise solemn texts. Imagine opening a manuscript on theology and finding a drawing of a knight jousting with a snail. You stifle a laugh, realizing humor has always found its way into even the strictest of settings.
The bell tolls softly, calling the monks to prayer.
They file into the chapel, robes whispering, heads bowed. You follow, slipping into the back as the chant begins. Low voices rise and fall in Gregorian harmony, each note suspended like mist in the air. The Latin words are less important than the cadence, which rolls through the chamber like waves across sand.
You breathe slower, your body matching the rhythm. The chant is hypnotic, a lullaby that makes the stone itself seem alive.
Later, you wander into the cloister garden. Moonlight spills across orderly rows of herbs, lavender, sage, mint. The fountain trickles at the center, its water glimmering faintly. You run your fingers across the leaves, their scent rising like invisible incense. A monk explains softly that these herbs heal body and spirit alike, used in balms, teas, and rituals. You think of modern medicine and realize much of it grew from knowledge cultivated patiently here, in quiet courtyards where plants and prayers intertwined.
You sit on a bench beneath an archway, watching shadows drift across the stone.
The monastery hums with a peace that seeps into your bones, but it isn't all solemn. You catch sight of a younger monk sneaking a plum from the kitchen basket, glancing around guiltily before biting into it. He notices your amused look and grins, juice running down his chin. Even here, discipline has its limits. Historians still argue whether monastic life was truly an escape from the world or, paradoxically, a way of shaping it. Were these monks retreating from society, or were they preserving the very foundations of it through their work in learning and agriculture? As you sit in the quiet garden, you sense it was both. They stepped aside from noise so that something lasting could survive the centuries.
Night deepens and the bells ringen.
The monks retire, silence reclaiming the halls. You find a small cell offered to travelers, its bed a simple straw mattress, its blanket coarse but warm.
A single candle flickers, casting long shadows that dance against the walls.
You lie down, feeling the day's weariness settle in. Outside, the fountain whispers, "Steh die Esprit."
Your eyes close slowly.
You imagine the quill scratching across parchment, the chant rising and falling, the herbs swaying in moonlight. In the hush of the monastery, everything seems ordered, deliberate, eternal. The stillness wraps around you, not empty but full of presence, as though the walls themselves are breathing in rhythm with your own.
Sleep comes gently, like a monk's blessing, leaving you adrift in the quiet sanctuary you erwachen.
The hush of the monastery dissolves into the roar of the sea. Salt spray dampens your cheeks, gulls wheel overhead, and the horizon stretches wide as a canvas of shifting blues. You're aboard a ship once more, not a Viking longship this time, but a sturdy cog, sails billowing, its deck crowded with barrels, ropes, and sailors singing bawdy tunes that carry across the waves.
The wind tugs at your hair, and the wooden planks creak beneath your feet with each swell.
The captain, a burly man with a weathered beard, barks orders as sailors scramble up rigging like acrobats. Their movements are swift, practiced, and entirely too casual for people dangling 50 feet above hard timber. You grip the railing tighter just in case the ocean gets any funny ideas. Here's your historical anchor. During the late Middle Ages, maritime trade blossomed across Europe. The Hanseatic League, a powerful commercial alliance of northern cities like Lübeck and Hamburg, controlled trade routes in the Baltic and North Seas, shaping economies and politics for centuries. You glance at the cargo stacked on deck, timber, furs, salt, barrels of herring, and realize these very goods once connected entire regions, making fortunes and fueling rivalries. The ship pitches, and the sailor nearby chuckles at your wide-eyed wobble. He offers you a mug of something strong that tastes suspiciously like seawater mixed with vinegar. You sputter, and the crew erupts in laughter, clearly delighted by the landlubber's initiation. At least it warms your chest, if not your pride. A pod of dolphins appears, racing alongside the ship, their sleek bodies slicing through waves with effortless grace. The sailors cheer, claiming it's good luck. One even insists the dolphins are old shipmates reincarnated, back to guide them safely. You're not sure about that, but the sight is mesmerizing. Silver arcs glittering against the foam, a reminder of how playful the sea can be when it isn't trying to drown you. Quirky tidbit: medieval sailors often believed in sea monsters lurking beneath the waves. Tales spread of krakens large enough to drag ships under, and mermaids who sang sailors to their doom. You peer over the railing, half expecting to see a tentacle rise, but only a stray fish leaps up, slapping your cheek before plopping back into the water. The sailors howl with laughter, and you realize sometimes the sea's monsters are just smaller and more humiliating. As night falls, lanterns are lit, casting a golden glow across the deck. The sailors gather to share stories, tales of storms survived, ports visited, treasures lost and found. One tells of a ghost ship seen on a foggy night, sails tattered, crew silent, drifting aimlessly. Another swears he once saw St. Elmo's fire, blue flames dancing atop the masts during a storm.
You listen, the rocking of the ship lulling you into a trance where fact and legend blur seamlessly.
Historians still argue whether maritime trade shaped medieval Europe more through wealth or through culture. Did these voyages simply line pockets, or did they knit together ideas, languages, and traditions across distant shores? Standing here, you suspect both. Every barrel, every rope, every risky journey carried not just goods but also stories, weaving a tapestry of connection across the waters. Later the crew beds down on deck, wrapped in rough blankets, using coils of rope as pillows. You lie beside them, the stars above so bright they feel close enough to touch. The Milky Way stretches like spilled flour across the sky, mirrored faintly in the waves below. The ship rocks gently, a cradle on the sea, and you find yourself swaying with it, your body sinking to the rhythm. You close your eyes, but the sea keeps singing, a deep, endless lullaby of crests and troughs. The dolphins are gone, the lanterns dim, and the world is nothing but water, sky, and breath. Wrapped in salt air and the scent of tarred ropes, you surrender to the tide of sleep, drifting as surely as the ship drifts toward its unseen harbor. The steady rocking of the ship dissolves into the gentle sway of tree branches, and when you blink awake, you're standing at the edge of a dense medieval forest. The air is cool and damp, filled with the earthy perfume of moss, pine needles, and wet bark. Mist clings to the ground, curling around your ankles like a shy cat. The canopy overhead blocks most of the sky, letting in only stray shafts of sunlight that dapple the forest floor. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker taps out a steady beat, while unseen creatures rustle in the undergrowth. You take a cautious step forward, leaves crunching softly beneath at your boots. Every tree seems to lean closer as if listening. The forest is no mere backdrop, it feels alive, an old companion holding memories older than castles and cathedrals. People of the Middle Ages certainly thought so. Here's your historical anchor. Forests were not just wilderness but essential resources. Kings reserved royal forests for hunting, while common folk relied on them for firewood, game, berries, and herbs. Forest law often restricted what peasants could take, leading to tensions that simmered like kindling waiting for a spark. You push through ferns and come across a small clearing where a campfire smolders. A man in a hood pulls his bowstring taut, practicing silently.
The sicht stirs a smile, yes, the legends of outlaws.
Quirky tidbit, stories of Robin Hood and his merry men date back at least to the 14th century, blending real social tensions with folktale flair. Was he a noble thief or a later invention of storytellers? Hard to say, but here in the dappled clearing, the myth feels tangible. The archer releases an arrow with a sharp twang, and it fads into the center of a crude target painted on bark.
He gives you a nod, half warning, half welcome.
Deeper in the forest, you hear the babble of a brag and follow the sound. The water gleams silver as it dances over stones. You crouch to drink, coolness spreading down your throat, tasting faintly of minerals and leaves. A squirrel scolds you from a branch above, tail twitching indignantly as though you've intruded on its private spring. You apologize softly. It seems wise to keep peace with the locals. The forest is not just refuge but danger too. Wolves once prowled these woods, their howls echoing in winter nights. Travelers risked ambush from both beasts and bandits. To enter a forest after sunset was to step into a world where the rules of village and church held no sway. Yet here in daylight it feels protective, like a quilt of green wrapped around your shoulders. You pause beneath an oak tree, trunk wide enough for 3 people to encircle. Its bark is rough, its branches sprawling like arms sheltering you. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed forests were enchanted, or whether those tales were exaggerations by later poets.
Whatever the truth, when wind stirs the leaves into a whisper that sounds eerily like voices, you understand why stories of fairies and spirits took root.
The forest feels like a place where reality is soft ruined, the edges where magic seeps in like mist. A flash of color catches your eye, wildflowers blooming defiantly in a patch of light. Purple, yellow, white, their petals bright against the dark green. You kneel to brush a petal and a honeybee bumbles past, drunk on nectar. For all the solemnity of stone cathedrals and armored knights, here is the hum of life at its simplest, steady and ancient.
As dusk falls, shadows lengthen and the forest deepens into mystery.
Owls stir in their hollows, eyes glowing faintly. The brook's babble softens into the distance, replaced by the chirp of crickets. You find a fallen log to sit upon, the moss cushioning your weight, and watch fireflies blink into existence. Their glow drifts lazily, like embers from an invisible fire, lighting your path in soft, shifting constellations. You stretch out beneath the oak, using your cloak as a blanket. The forest around you doesn't sleep, it hums, breathes, shifts, but its rhythm becomes a lullaby. The rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl, the distant snap of a twig all fold into one tapestry of sound.
Your eyes grow heavy.
The myths of outlaws, enchanted groves, and ghostly whispers dissolve into dreams, and soon you're adrift in a woodland that is less feared and more embraced, timeless and sheltering.
The whispers of the forest fade into the clatter of hooves on stone.
When you lift your head, you find yourself at the edge of a bustling medieval town, its gates yawning open as carts roll in at dawn. The air is alive with smells both delightful and less so. Fresh bread wafting from a baker's oven mixes with the pungent tang of tanneries, and somewhere close by, pigs are loudly making their contribution to the morning chorus. The town walls loom overhead, crenellated and proud, but within, the streets twist and turn like a maze designed by someone who thought straight lines were a luxury. You step forward, nearly tripping over a chicken. It squawks indignantly, darting between two children, chasing each other with sticks.
Welcome to medieval urban life. Crowded, noisy, fragrant in weiß ULL remember for better and worse.
Yet there's an undeniable pulse here, a sense that behind every crooked door lies a story waiting to be told. Here's your solid historical fact. By the 13th century, towns across Europe were centers of trade and craft, many governed by charters that granted them privileges distinct from the feudal countryside. Guilds flourished, associations of craftsmen and merchants regulating everything from prices to quality. You pass a row of shops where signs hang above the doors, a boot for the cobbler, a tankard for the brewer, a loaf for the baker. Words aren't always needed when most townsfolk can read only images.
The streets teem with sellers hawking goats.
One waves a skewer of sizzling meat, the fat dripping onto coals. Another calls out about fine cloth imported from Flanders, holding up bolts of fabric so bright they look unnatural against the drab buildings. A tooth puller shouts his dubious services, holding aloft a pair of terrifying iron pliers. You instinctively cover your mouth, silently thanking your toothbrush back home. In a narrow alley, you find an inn. Its sign, painted with a cheerful boar, creaks in the breeze. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, laughter, and the scent of stew. A lute player strums in the corner, his song both tuneful and slightly off-key. You settle at a bench, sharing bread and broth with strangers who treat you as a friend simply because you're within earshot. A burly man tells tales of traveling merchants while a woman describes a pilgrimage she swears brought her back with a relic. You nod, wondering whether her story is miracle, memory, or marketing. Quirky tidbit: many medieval townsfolk rarely bathed, not because they disliked cleanliness, but because hot baths were often associated with bathhouses, and bathhouses had reputations that weren't exactly saintly. Instead, people relied on perfumes, clean linen, or simply ignoring the smell. You sniff the air in the tavern, nodding at the accuracy of that historical footnote. As the day passes, you explore further. The town square fills with jugglers, peddlers, and petitioners. A magistrate reads out new ordinances while a boy with a drum tries to keep the crowd's attention. A woman sells charms against the evil eye, her table covered with beads, bones, and little carved figures. Children dart between stalls, one proudly holding a pastry almost bigger than his head. You smile, thinking some joys are timeless, pastries included. Historians still argue whether medieval towns were truly centers of freedom or just another layer of hierarchy. Did guilds empower craftsmen, or did they stifle competition? Were towns' charters a step toward democracy, or merely convenient for kings looking to tax more efficiently?
Wandering These streets, you pay but seeds.
There's freedom in the chaos, but order too, an invisible web of rules guiding every loaf baked and shoe stitched.
As twilight falls, the streets glow with torchlight.
Shadows stretch long across the cobbles.
The taverns grow luder, spilling Laukata into alleys.
Above, the cathedral bells toll curfew, a reminder that even joy must eventually sleep. You find a quiet corner near the town wall, the stones still radiating the day's heat. A cat curls beside you, purring softly as if claiming you as its newest friend. The noise fades gradually, the shouts of vendors, the laughter from taverns, the squeal of pigs. What remains is the hum of the town settling into rest, a collective sigh after the rush of day. You close your eyes, the stones are lit bend your back, the cat warm against your side. Sleep seeps in gently, wrapping you in the rhythm of a medieval town that, for all its smells and noise, holds a kind of rough, comforting heartbeat. Here, within crooked streets and crooked lives, you drift off, one more dreamer among countless others. When morning comes again, you find yourself no longer among crooked medieval streets, but standing at the edge of a vast stone bridge, its arches stretching over a river that gleams like molten silver in the sunrise. The water reflects towers and battlements in rippling patterns, as if the town's very image wavers between the real and the dreamlike. You follow the flow of merchants across the bridge, pack animals loaded with goods, peasants balancing baskets on their backs, clerks in long robes scribbling notes as they walk. The hum of trade grows louder until it feels like the whole world has gathered here. Ahead lies a market fair, one of those grand seasonal events that turned towns into magnets of humanity. Tents sprout like colorful mushrooms, fabric flapping in the breeze. Bright dyes, saffron, indigo, madder, spill across stalls like captured rainbows. The smell of roasted meat, spiced wine, and honey cakes floods the air. If medieval daily life seemed hectic, the fair multiplies that chaos by 10. You edge closer, half amused, half wary of being swept away in the crowd. Here's your historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, fairs such as those in Champagne, France, or Stourbridge in England became economic engines for all of Europe. They weren't just about local crafts, but about connecting regions. Italian merchants sold silks, Baltic traders brought furs, and coins from far-off kingdoms clinked in leather purses. In many ways, these fairs were the ancestors of modern global trade, though, thankfully, Amazon doesn't require you to haggle face-to-face with a guy trying to sell you a goat. You pause by a troupe of entertainers. Jugglers toss flaming torches with reckless cheer, while a man on stilts teeters dangerously close to the crowd. Children shriek with delight, their sticky fingers clutching candied nuts. A trained bear plods behind its handler, wearing a ridiculous little cap, while a bagpiper squeals out a tune that somehow manages to be both cheerful and slightly irritating. You clap politely, partly for the bear and partly because you don't want to find out what happens when people don't clap for a bear wearing a hat. Among the stalls, you notice more unusual offerings. A seller of relics insists that this fragment of wood once belonged to Noah's Ark, and that vial of cloudy water is from the River Jordan itself. Another vendor whispers about charms carved from meteorites, each promising to ward off plague. Do they work? You'd wager not, but it's a reminder that medieval fairs were equal parts commerce, theater, and imagination. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fairs employed official criers whose job was to enforce silence during public announcements. They carried a staff tipped with brass, which they clanged against the ground before shouting, oyez to grab attention. Imagine trying that in today's shopping mall. Though to be fair, a booming ooze might actually work better than half the advertisements you hear. As you wander, you hear snippets of languages from across Europe: Italian, French, German, Latin, even the occasional Arabic from traders who traveled extraordinary distances. A scholar nearby notes the fair is as much a university as a marketplace. People exchange not just goods but ideas, architectural sketches, herbal remedies, navigational tips whispered by sailors who've dared the Atlantic. Historians still argue whether these fairs were more influential in shaping economies or cultures. Were they the cradle of capitalism or just lively spectacles that happened to grease the wheels of trade? As always, the answer seems to hover between the two, elusive as smoke from a roasting spit.
You pause to watch a manish hunger at work.
Coins from 20 kingdoms glint on his table, each carefully weighed to ensure no one is cheated. Behind him, a parchment nailed to a post lists exchange rates, though you suspect those numbers shift with the wind. Medieval money, much like modern cryptocurrency, was a playground for confusion. At least here you can see the silver, unlike some digital coins that exist only as lines of code and bad financial decisions. The fair's energy is intoxicating. Dancers whirl in bright skirts, bells jingling from their ankles. Merchants argue loudly, waving their arms like conductors orchestrating a symphony of commerce.
Somewhere a roasted goose crackles for dripping into the fire.
You let the rhythm carry you, weaving between tents, feeling the pulse of a medieval world that feels startlingly alive, startlingly human. But amid the joy, shadows linger. A crier warns of pickpockets, and indeed you notice a nimble hand reaching for a merchant's purse before being swatted away. At another corner, a preacher rails against greed and sin, his words swallowed by the din. And in a quieter alley, a weary mother nurses her child, her basket of unsold wares at her feet. The fair is abundance for some, survival for others. You tuck that truth away, recognizing that even in the brightest lights, shadows stretch long. Night falls, and the fair transforms. Torches flicker like stars pinned to the earth. Musicians strike up lively tunes, couplers dance with reckless abandon, skirts flying, boats stomping. The smell of spiced wine fills your nose as someone presses a cup into your hand. You sip, warmth spreading through your chest. For a moment, you forget the weight of centuries and feel only the joy of being swept up in something bigger than yourself.
You wander to the river's edge where the bridge gleams under moonlight.
The fair's noise fades into a low hum, distant yet comforting. You sit, letting the cool breeze brush against your face, your cup resting loosely in your hand. The world here is vibrant, messy, joyful, flawed, just like the markets and gatherings you know in your own time.
As the fair drifts toward slumber, so do you. The tents blur, the torches soften, the music becomes a lullaby. You lean back, the stone worm beneath you, the river singing quickly below.
You close your eyes, carrying the fair with you into dreams, a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and stories from a world that still feels astonishingly alive. The fair dissolves like smoke, and when you open your eyes, you are standing before the something vast, something almost too massive to comprehend at first glance. Stone blocks rise in layered steps against the horizon, glowing amber beneath the low sun. You blink, and then recognition strikes. This is no ordinary ruin, but the mighty pyramid at Giza. The air shimmers with heat, sand crunches under your sandals, and for a moment you wonder if you've accidentally walked onto a History Channel documentary. Don't worry, you're safe, and no one's about to hand you a pickaxe and tell you to start hauling limestone. You trudge closer, your head tilting back until your neck protests. The pyramid is so big it warps your sense of scale. Each block is taller than your shoulders, and there are thousands of them stacked with maddening precision. You run your hand over the rough limestone, tracing grooves carved 4,000 years ago by workers whose names are mostly lost to time. Here's a firm historical fact. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was completed around 2560 BCE, standing as the tallest human-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years. That's basically the skyscraper record-holding equivalent of an Olympic athlete who never retires. Tourists today marvel at its size, but in its prime, the pyramid gleamed with polished white casing stones that caught the sun so brightly it might have blinded anyone approaching.
Imagine a gentle rising from the desert, a monument visible for miles.
No wonder ancient travelers thought of it as a wonder of the world. It was literally designed to awe you into silence.
You take a slow walk around the base, the desert wind whipping at your face.
A guide of sorts, let's call him your dream self with a little extra authority, whispers facts into your ear. Laborers weren't slaves as often assumed, but paid workers, part of a rotating workforce that included farmers during the Nile's flooding season. When fields lay underwater, people turned to pyramid building as seasonal work. They earned bread, beer, and sometimes the eternal bragging rights of saying they built something that still dominates the skyline 4,500 years later. Quirky tidbit, archaeologists discovered that workers' diets included a surprising amount of beef and fish. Turns out, if you were hauling multi-ton blocks, you got fed pretty well. Some graffiti left by crews even carried nicknames like Friends of Khufu or Drunkards of Menkor. Proof that even pyramid builders had the ancient equivalent of workplace inside jokes.
You climb a little way up, not too far, because dreams are forgiving, but gravity is not. From this height, the desert stretches endlessly, golden waves rolling under the Zen.
Camels plod in the distance and the Nile glimmers faintly to the east. You sit, catching your breath, and wonder about mysteries still debated today. Historians still argue whether ramps, levers, or some ingenious lost method raised these stones. Was it straight ramps, spiral ramps, counterweights? Did aliens help? Spoiler, no, but the theories make for great late-night cable TV.
The truth may forever lie hidden within the silent blocks themselves. The sun dips low, painting the pyramid in deep orange. Shadows lengthen and the desert calls.
You wander toward a smaller pyramid, one built for a queen and past tombs carved with hieroglyphs. The carvings show daily life, scribes, bakers, dancers, cattle herders, all frozen in time. You realize these weren't just monuments to kings, but to entire communities. Every worker, every artisan, every cook who stirred pots of lentils contributed to something enduring. It's humbling in the kind of way that makes you check your own calendar and realize your important emails don't exactly measure up to carving stone for eternity.
As twilight falls, torches flicker to life, carried by priests in linen robes.
A low chant hums in the dry air, rhythmic and slow, like the desert's heartbeat. You follow the procession toward a temple at the pyramid's base. Incense drifts, sweet and heavy. Offerings of bread and beer line the altar, symbols of sustenance for the afterlife. You watch as shadows sway across carved walls, feeling time itself stretch thin, as though you're peeking through a veil into another world. The crowd disperses and you're left in near silence. The stars above begin to spill across the night sky, more numerous than you've ever seen.
The desert strips of distractions, leaving only vastness and wonder.
You lie back on the cooling sand, the pyramid towering at your side, its peak a dark triangle pointing toward constellations that ancient astronomers studied with reverence. Some even argue the pyramids align with Orion's belt. Intentional or coincidence, historians still debate. But lying here, staring at stars arranged like jewels, you can almost believe it was on purpose, a cosmic blueprint set in stone. Sleep seeps in as gently as the night wind. You let your body sink into the sand, each breath slowing, each heartbeat steadying. The pyramid looms beside you, not menacing but protective, like a guardian of forgotten dreams.
The hum of the desert is a lullaby, soft, infinite, eternal.
And as you drift, the journey begins to dissolve, your footsteps fading from towns, fairs, palaces, and deserts, until only one final story remains, your own rest, here and now. Now, as the final echoes of our journey fade, your body grows heavier, softer, as though the last threads of wakefulness are loosening and letting go. The pyramids, the markets, the oceans, the castles, they all recede into the distance like lanterns carried away on the wind.
You no longer need to follow the steps, the voice. You only need to be still.
Sehr want you slows the sounds dim into a gentle hush, and your breath becomes the greater halten, guiding you deeper into calm. Each inhale brings coolness, each exhale releases warmth until your chest moves without effort, without thought. Muscles melt, shoulders drop, your hands rest in complete ease. Imagine yourself on soft ground, safe and steady, a blanket of night wrapped gently around you. The stars above shimmer faintly, not to call you forward, but to watch over you as you surrender to peace. You are untethered from time, free from weight, free from the constant pull of thought. Every image of history becomes a dream you can set aside, confident it will wait for you tomorrow.
For now you carry nothing. Not stone blocks, not market's noise, not emperor's crowns. You carry only rest, only the soft rhythm of sleep.
So let your eyes close fully if they haven't already. Let your body drift as though it were a feather carried by the gentlest current. And know that tonight the story belongs not to kings or builders or wanderers, but to you, the sleeper, the dreamer, the one who now rests.
Good night. Sweet dreams.